It started quietly, like most things that end up mattering too much. I didn't think of it as pursuit, not at first. It was just spending time together, small conversations that stretched to late, the kind where silence didn't feel like an ending. She laughed easily. She made space for me, but not too much. Always that careful balance. I respected it. I thought I did. We'd stay up talking about nothing, about films neither of us cared to finish. Music, she said, reminded her of winter. She was always cold, always wrapping herself tighter in blankets when the night dragged on. I offered warmth once. She smiled, shook her head, said she was fine. That was the first no. It didn't sting, not then. I told myself it was timing, or politeness, or her being careful. But something in her eyes lingered, a softness that wasn't invitation. Not exactly, but not rejection either. Something that said, not now. That not now lived rent-free in me for days. I began timing my visits around her moods, though I didn't call it that. I just knew when she'd be quiet, when she'd want company. I learned her rhythms without trying. Or maybe I did try. It's hard to tell now. Each time, the same pattern. She'd talk, I'd listen. She'd lean close to make a point, her voice low, her shoulder brushing mine, then pull away as if she'd remembered something. That small retreat always left air too heavy to breathe. Once, I told her she looked beautiful when she was tired. She laughed, said I was strange. Not cruel, just distant, like she wanted to keep something intact. I told myself I admired that restraint, but admiration turns sour when it meets repetition. I started counting her refusals, not consciously, but they stuck. A look, a word, a half-smile that wasn't quite enough. She didn't owe me anything. I reminded myself of that every time I left. Still, the distance felt deliberate, like she was testing how far I'd go before I stopped showing up. I never asked directly. I didn't want to make it real. Instead, I'd stay until she began to fidget, until she'd start checking her phone or folding things that didn't need folding. That was my cue. I'd leave quietly. Each time, I'd close her door softly, the latch clicking like punctuation. Walking home through the empty streets, I'd replay it, all the moments that could have gone differently, the slight shifts in tone that maybe meant something. I tried not to overthink, but thinking was the only thing left to do. She'd message sometimes, small things, a song link, a meme, something about her cat. I'd respond quickly, always too quickly, then nothing for hours. I began to sense when she'd go quiet. The silences between her replies became predictable, almost mathematical. I could tell when I'd said too much, or not enough. I learned her patterns like a second language. I started noticing other details, how she'd sit cross-legged on her couch, how her left hand always brushed through her hair when she was unsure, how she'd look away mid-sentence as if hiding something she didn't want to say. I kept thinking, maybe next time, maybe when she's less tired, less distracted, less careful. But next time came and went, each one a small echo of the last. Once, she invited me over after a long week, said she wanted to talk. My chest tightened at the message. I told myself it didn't mean anything, but I dressed better than usual anyway. When I got there, she was curled up in her usual spot, hair messy, eyes ringed with fatigue. She looked fragile in a way that made me feel protective. We talked. She told me about her job, her insomnia, her ex who kept texting her. I nodded, listened, tried to hide the irritation curling in my stomach. When she leaned her head on my shoulder, I felt it again, that false closeness, the kind that only lasts until she realizes where she is. And sure enough, she pulled back, mumbled something about being tired. I smiled, said I should go. Her thanks for coming sounded final, like closure without the courtesy of explanation. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her scent lingered on my shirt. It wasn't perfume, just soap, maybe laundry detergent. Something clean, impersonal. I thought about how easy it would be to let it go, to move on. But the mind resists easy things. Instead, I began keeping mental notes, times, gestures, changes in tone. It wasn't obsession, not yet. It was just observation. I told myself that knowing her was a kind of closeness, even if she never wanted more. There's a strange satisfaction in understanding someone deeply while staying unseen. I wondered if she ever noticed how careful I'd become around her. How I measured my words, softened my voice, made myself smaller so she wouldn't retreat. Maybe she did. Maybe that's why she started pulling away faster. She stopped inviting me over. Said she was busy, tired, not feeling up for company. I said I understood. And I did. But I also knew that understanding is a kind of distance, the kind that hardens over time. The last time I saw her, it was unplanned. I ran into her at the corner store near her apartment. She looked startled, then smiled too quickly. We made small talk. She said she'd been working a lot. Her voice carried that polite fatigue people use when they're trying to end things gently. I asked if she wanted to catch up sometime. She hesitated. Said, yeah, maybe. The maybe was soft, almost apologetic. I nodded, pretended to believe it. When I left, I didn't look back. But I could feel her eyes on me, or maybe I imagined that too. Back home, I sat in the dark, scrolling through old messages, the spaces between words suddenly louder than the words themselves. I thought about all the times I'd left quietly, believing that silence was respect. But maybe it was cowardice, or maybe it was patience disguised as self-control. Either way, it became habit. I started leaving everything quietly: conversations, people, places. The restraint calcified. What I didn't realize then was that distance, once learned, doesn't fade. It stays. It becomes part of you. And when someone teaches you that lesson slowly enough, you start to feel grateful for it. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. It wasn't about her anymore. That's what I told myself. When you say something often enough, it starts to sound like truth, even if it never was. I stopped reaching out. Stopped waiting for messages that wouldn't come. But silence leaves space, and space fills itself. With thoughts. With patterns. With her. I knew her schedule long before I meant to. Not because I followed. Not exactly. I just noticed. She left for work around 8. Sometimes earlier if it rained. She always carried an umbrella, even on clear mornings, one of those habits born from disappointment. She'd stop at the same cafe, order the same thing: a black coffee, 1 sugar, never milk. She hated the way it dulled the bitterness. I remembered that detail from one of our old talks, the kind that seemed meaningless then. It's strange how the small things survive after everything else erodes. I didn't keep track, not consciously. But I began recognizing the sound of her door closing, the rhythm of her steps in the hallway. You learn these things when you live near someone long enough. You can tell when they're tired, or happy, or pretending. She hummed when she was calm, fell silent when she wasn't. I stopped calling friends, stopped answering messages. It wasn't intentional isolation, it was focus. I started writing again, or maybe documenting. I'd jot down the times she came home, the lights that stayed on, the nights she stayed out. Patterns reveal things people don't say. I wasn't doing it out of malice. There was no plan. I just wanted to understand the gaps, where her warmth went when she wasn't giving it, what occupied her silence. Sometimes, through the thin walls, I'd hear her laugh. Not the laugh I knew. This one was sharper, louder, like she was trying too hard. I wondered if someone was with her. The thought didn't hurt, it just settled somewhere deep, like dust. I didn't imagine scenes. I didn't spiral. I just noted it. A fact among others. She changed little things. Curtains drawn more often. A new lamp by the window. Different shoes by the door. People reveal themselves through their rearrangements. The world shifts when they try to feel safe again. I caught myself watching her window some nights. It wasn't about her face, or body, or presence. It was about rhythm. Light on, light off. Shadow crossing glass. She moved slower when she thought she was alone. There's a kind of honesty in that. Once, I saw her sit on the floor, back against the couch, face lit by her phone. She looked tired, older. Not in years, just in softness. I almost felt sorry for her, almost, because part of me liked that she was finally still. That she wasn't performing the easy charm she used to wear like perfume. Sometimes, I'd walk past her building just to confirm she was there. Never close, never obvious. Just enough to see that she still existed in the same world as me. The distance became ritual. It steadied me. I told myself I could stop anytime. That I was just noticing, not interfering. That knowing her life was no different than knowing the weather forecast. Predictable. Harmless. But then I started thinking about how predictability is its own kind of intimacy. You can know someone better through patterns than through conversation. Words lie. Habits don't. Once, late at night, I heard her crying. Not loud, just the kind of quiet that seeps through walls. I froze. My instinct was to go to her door, to knock, to ask. But I didn't. I sat still, listening. The crying stopped after a while. The silence after was heavier. I realized then that the thing I'd been chasing all along wasn't her affection. It was that sound, the break in composure. Proof that she wasn't untouchable, that she felt something she couldn't manage. The next morning, she acted normal. Left at 8, coffee in hand. I didn't look out the window, but I knew. I could hear her voice in the stairwell, talking to someone on the phone. She laughed again, the sharp version. I wrote down the time. Not because I needed to. It just felt wrong not to. Days blurred after that. Weeks maybe? She changed her locks. I heard the locksmith through the wall, drilling, scraping. It wasn't surprising. She was smart, careful. She must have sensed something. Maybe not about me, but about the air around her. People can feel when they're being watched, even if they can't explain it. After that, she started closing her windows earlier, double-checking the latch. I'd see her shadow pause at the curtain before pulling it shut. Once, she looked straight out, toward my building. I moved away from the light instinctively. My heart didn't race. It was calm. Maybe she saw me. Maybe not. It didn't matter. Knowing she could sense me was enough. Presence without contact. That's all it had ever been. I started dreaming about her, not in the usual way. Not sexual. Not romantic. Just present. She'd be there, in rooms that didn't exist, silent but close. I'd wake up feeling like she'd just left. The line between memory and imagination blurred. Sometimes, I'd write down what I remembered from those dreams and compare it to what I observed. The details overlapped more than they should have. Once, I found myself outside her door again. I don't remember deciding to go. My hands were empty. I wasn't going to knock. I just stood there, listening. There was music playing softly. A song I recognized from her playlist, the one she shared with me months ago. That small connection hit harder than I expected. I stayed until the track ended. Then I left. Walking home, I felt a strange clarity, the kind that comes after long restraint. I realized I didn't need her response anymore. I didn't need her warmth or her voice or her permission. What I wanted was already mine, the knowledge of her. People think possession requires touch. It doesn't. It requires understanding. Once you know someone deeply enough, you own a part of them that they can't reclaim. I began to write less. Watching was enough. Her patterns no longer changed. The story had stabilized. She existed, I existed, and between us was the distance she'd taught me to keep. I thought that would be the end of it. But endings rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly, like her rejections did. You only recognize them after they've settled in. It ended the same way it began, without ceremony. I stopped noticing when. The days folded into one another, soft and soundless. Her name appeared less in my mind, until it felt like a word from a language I used to speak. Sometimes I caught myself reaching for my phone, then pausing, unsure what I meant to do. There was no message to send, no number worth dialing. The distance had finally become real. Not the kind you build out of pride or caution, but the kind that settles naturally, like dust after movement stops. I didn't resent her anymore. Not really. Resentment takes energy, and I'd spent mine long ago. What lingered was quiet or dull awareness of something that used to matter. When I passed her building now, it was just another address. The windows were dark more often than not. Maybe she'd moved. Maybe not. I didn't check. The knowing no longer mattered. Some nights, I'd wake up suddenly, heart steady, mind blank, and realize it had been hours since I'd thought of her. The absence of thought can feel like a kind of peace. Or maybe it's just fatigue. I started filling my time against small routines, nothing significant. Coffee in the morning, walks that led nowhere, the steady rhythm of breathing through hours that no longer needed to mean anything. People talk about closure like it's an event, something you can witness. But in truth, it's erosion. You don't decide to let go. You just forget to hold on. The silence she left wasn't punishment. It was instruction. It taught me that connection, when stretched afar, snaps quietly. No sound, no scar, just the faint mark of something once pulled taut. I think about that sometimes, how much effort I spent interpreting her, translating gestures into meaning. Maybe that was the real intimacy, not her, but the act of attention itself. I turned a person into a mirror and called the reflection love. Now that the mirror's gone, all that's left is the room, empty and plain, but mine again. There's comfort in that kind of emptiness. It doesn't ask for anything. It doesn't turn away. I don't check her messages anymore. I deleted them weeks ago, though sometimes my fingers still find the spot on the screen where her name used to be. Habit without purpose. A ghost of motion. She's probably fine. I like to think she is. There's a faint decency in that thought, even if it's just a way to ease guilt. We both played our parts. She refused closeness. I mistook curiosity for care. There's no villain in that, just two people misdimming each other. The world is full of that kind of silence and written endings, conversations that fade mid-sentence. I've grown comfortable there. Some nights, I still sit in the dark, the same way I used to after leaving her place. Except now the quiet isn't waiting for anything. It's complete on its own. That might be what peace is, the absence of expectation. I don't dream of her anymore. Or if I do, I don't remember. When I wake, the air feels still, the kind of stillness that doesn't belong to anyone. I used to think distance was something you gave someone. Now I know it's something you become.